So, a couple things have happened since our attempts to have a dialogue about the subject on whether or not Joseph Smith started polygamy. So, this, I guess, technically will be maybe considered a drama post, or maybe a better way to frame it would be a communication post. So, I know this is basically wrapped up well enough as far as Bill and RFM are concerned, but I'm not quite satisfied with how things ended, I guess, and the information that's out there currently, I guess, about what all went down. So I have a lot to say, but I'm going to just basically keep it to the emails. I'm going to go mostly chronologically, just to walk everybody through kind of behind the scenes, what has been happening and what's been going on. And I guess the reason why, well, I think Michelle actually put it really well in her episode where she goes over these emails. Let's cut to that.
The reason I am doing this is because I have to respond to some things that have been happening in the last few weeks. I have to let you know the insanity that I have been dealing with the last few weeks that I would like to just ignore or deal with privately. But since it's been made so public, and since outright blatant lies have been told and are being told, I need to clear the air. I hate to get into anything that feels like drama or gossip or tit for tat. I don't like that. I would much rather just deal with things directly head on with people rather than publicizing them. But at the same time, there comes a point when you have to tell the truth, right? And I think there is going to be, I think that there's a constructive lesson to learn here about how willing people are to just lie about people.
Wow. So that's exactly how I feel. Minus one correction. One correction is that I can offer Michelle a particular grace that she's unable to offer to us, and that is, I don't think anything that Michelle did or said that I think is a misrepresentation or is very unfair, straw man, ad hominem, all of those things. I can at least give Michelle the grace to say that I don't think that it was deliberate, as far as like she's maliciously trying to lie about us and lie about what's been going on. I can give it to Michelle that I think she thinks she's presenting things accurately, and how she is presenting things is how she feels honestly about the situation. So yeah, that's the only difference. But basically, I'm going to be doing the same thing she did, and I guess giving our side of the perspective, and also going further, because there were more email exchanges and more things that happened, after Michelle's post. So I'm going to kind of continue it to the end, to the conclusion. And so yeah, let's get started. Let's get started on the drama llama train here. So it all started with a call-in at the end of Mormonism Live 130. So the show was not about polygamy, but we did have a caller at the end that wanted Bill and RFM to kind of take this on. He started to go into this conspiracy that everybody but Joseph and Hiram, all of Joseph's close associates and leaders in the church were practicing polygamy behind his back and framing him for it. And Joseph's enemies, those who left the church, who did not practice polygamy and who were, in fact, ardent, were really unpleased with the idea and the doctrine of it. So, anyway, everybody's in on the conspiracy, whether you're pro-polygamist or not. It's just Joseph is innocent, everybody else is lying. So, anyway, this caller starts to get into it, and Bill and I get a little bit incensed, RFM too, a little bit, but Bill actually is frustrated enough that he takes on this challenge. And I just want to say, this is actually something I have brought up before with Bill and RFM as a potential topic for the show, and in the past, neither of them have really wanted to take it on. And RFM has said why. He fully believes this to be a conspiracy theory, and because of that, it's just not something worth really getting into, because if it is truly a conspiracy theory, the likes of other ones out there, dialogue just doesn't really help. So for RFM, he has specifically said to me, it's not a subject he's really interested in getting into. He sees no benefit because the people who want to believe this are motivated by a faith position to believe it. And they're the only ones who do. So we do Mormonism Live. This is episode 131, and it's proof that Joseph practiced polygamy. So that was June 7th, 2023. In the meantime, because Bill and RFM both have separate shows entirely, podcasts entirely from Mormonism Live. So Radio Free Mormon, of course, has Radio Free Mormon, and Bill has Almost Awakened and Mormon Discussions and several others in the lineup. So RFM kind of basically repackaged the scholarship and the work he did connecting the affidavits from the Nauvoo Expositor newspaper to Doctrine and Covenants 132, and he published that as a standalone Radio Free Mormon episode. That's episode number 284, Mormon Polygamy Controversy, and that was released June 11th, 2023. After that, Michelle Stone from the podcast 132 Problems was the first really to directly reach out. So she does 132 Problems, episode 71, one Polygamy Deniers response to Bill Reel, RFM, and Brian Hales, because coincidentally enough, Saints Unscripted, just like the next day or maybe even 2 days after our episode, released a similar one with Brian Hales, also going over this subject of people who don't believe that Joseph started polygamy. So so I would say there are other podcasts out there, I think like Hemlock Knots and but perhaps others, I'm not as familiar, who take this position, that Joseph Smith did not start polygamy. But as far as I know, Michelle's the only one that made a response directly to our show. So so that was neat. So, and then I just wanted, she kind of insinuates there, she finds it interesting, is her word, that all both podcasts, this one from the faithful perspective, Saints Unscripted with Brian Hales, and then, from the less than faithful perspective, Mormonism Live with Bill and RFM, that, that we would release these episodes back to back, and it's just, she kind of really clearly insinuates that she believes that there were some workings going on in the background, which is funny, because those who know our show and are familiar with Bill and RFM's history with Brian Hales, there's no love lost here. Brian Hales will not come on the show. There have been some interesting back and forths. I wouldn't call ourselves really fans of him, and it's not that we wouldn't have him on our show, because we totally would, but he would definitely not interested in coming on, and I think for good reason, and that is because Bill and RFM would not let him get away with his normal apologetic tactics. Bill will ask follow-up questions, and I believe that Brian Hales is unwilling and unable to follow up with people pointing out the obvious conclusions and implications of the things that he says. That being said, moving on. I'm so sorry, taking too long for this. It really was a coincidence. So this is some texts between me and Bill and RFM. Just one real quick caveat. As I'm going through things here, I'm giving dates and giving times, especially with these emails. One thing to note is it is Mountain Time, Utah time, for the most part. I, however, happen to be, and throughout this, I have been in India. I'm in India now. So in these text messages, my phone is on like local time for me here. So that's just one caveat. If you are looking at these things, the timing and the dates of the text messages are going to be 11 and a half hours ahead of, of Utah time. Okay, moving on. So first is this text from RFM, who points out that Denver Snuffer just asked him out to dinner. And that's because RFM is deciding, or has decided at this point, to present his affidavits, the Nauvoo Expositor connecting to 132 at Sunstone, And that was a pretty recent development. And the next text is for me with the link to the Saints Unscripted episode, because I had just come across it, that they also did it right after we did. So this is what I say. I say, Saints Unscripted covered polygamy deniers just after you guys did, with Brian Hales even. So Bill Reel comes in, he says, who did it better, LOL, and RFM says, scooped him. And yeah, we kind of laughed about it, because we just figured Saints Unscripted probably had this episode in the works far longer than we did, and it was really, again, just because of a caller on the previous show that, had brought it up, that caused Bill to throw down this challenge or agree kind of last minute to make the next week's episode be about this, and so we just happened to beat them out, and that was kind of funny to us, but of course Michelle sees conspiracy and working behind the scenes for that. I still haven't seen it, by the way, so I'm not that interested in it. So, all right. So Bill puts out the invitation to have people on the show to, argue these points. And so Michelle, like, in doing a response, that's great. And then she also reaches out to Bill and Jeremy. I think Jeremy also reached out to Bill. So things start happening via email. I also want to point out things are also happening in the group Hemlock Knots, which, again, this is a group and a podcast that also take this tack that Joseph Smith did not practice polygamy. I'm not going to go into those as much. Michelle does go into some of those conversations on her YouTube channel when she goes over all of these emails. So I guess if you want to see more, you can go there or find them in the group Hemlock Knots. But I'm only going to touch very lightly on that. The majority of this is going to be from my perspective, my experience behind the scenes. So here's the first email, okay? This is on June 20th, 2023, 5:25 p.m. It is addressed to Jeremy, it's addressed to Michelle, RFM, and myself. And something I'll just point out here, the majority of the emails, like the front runner, I guess, for each side, for us, it's Bill. He is the primary person. RFM basically tunes things out on their side. Michelle is the main primary communicator. Jeremy and Whitney chime in very occasionally, as do I. So that's the background. I think that's enough. One more caveat. I am going to be showing all of these emails, and I'm not reading the entire thing for all of them, especially when Bill goes into the evidences, the land deeds, etc. My focus for this episode is to really look at the communication between the two parties here, and kind of why I think communication broke down so badly, and yeah, just kind of to explain more of the behind the scenes and our show, our point of view. So I have highlighted the places that I want to go over. If you are listening and you want to be able to see, then I recommend checking out the video. I will show the full text of all emails, even if I don't read all of them, so you will be able to pause the video and see if there's anything being misrepresented or missed. So now let's move on. Email number 1, Bill Reel, June 20th, 5:25 p.m. to Jeremy, Michelle, RFM, and me, Maven. I'm excited you've expressed interest in a collaboration episode, so he's happy that's happening. And he says, my hope is that we can design this to have the audience better understand our positions. I want to avoid distrust at all costs and hope we can create a conversation that looks and feels like 4 friends talking this out. I would like to plan this behind the scenes so that we utilize the time we have, and I am hoping for 2 hours of your time for the actual episode. We would post it on Mormonism Live, and you are free to cross-post wherever is beneficial. I'm hoping both sides will show their cards, as this allows the best chance to create an episode with as much understanding as possible and to try as smoothly as possible to give time to all of the important parts. The things I would like to involve in the discussion on our end, I would also want to balance that with things you would like to point out or have us respond to. And then he goes on and starts to give a list of several points of basically what our side is going to be. So just real quick recap right off the bat. There are specific things Bill has asked for and put out there, okay? So number 1, wanting to have the audience better understand our positions, wanting it to be friendly wanting it to be a good collaboration episode. Number 2, he asks to plan it behind the scenes so that we can have the best presentation possible for our viewers when it comes to the live show. Because this is an incredibly messy topic, as you may be aware. And if you're not, hopefully you will get it now. So, so right off the bat, Bill is asking, it's like a group presentation. We bring everything, do the research, do all the planning beforehand so that when it comes to presentation time, all the kinks have been kind of ironed out and everyone can put our best foot forward. It might seem weird that I'm kind of rehashing this, but this is going to be, as you will see, a major point of contention throughout this email exchange. So another analogy besides like the group project, presentation prep would be a court of law, basically discovery, where you've got the prosecution and the defense, right? And it's important for the process, for the jury, for a decision to be made, for all evidence to be put out there, and this beforehand, okay, before the court, before the trial, both sides hand over to the other all of the evidence that they have. There should never be any surprises or new evidence or new things brought into a trial live without the other side knowing beforehand. Of course, I'm sure RFM can say there's exceptions to that or whatever, but that's the general idea. Both sides know exactly what the other side has. They typically know what the argument is going to be. So not only do they come to the trial, ideally prepared with their own arguments, they're prepared with rebuttals and counter arguments to whatever the other side is doing. So that's kind of the point. That's what we're asking for here. Both sides give our best to the other, and also familiarize yourself with the oncoming or the upcoming rebuttals to your evidence so that you can respond to that. So again, that's what Bill lays out here in this request, okay? He's asking for both sides to show their cards. He's really wanting to streamline this. And then he just immediately dives in with our part. So I'm going to go to the next one. Again, this is a place where you can pause if you want to look at what he brings up, but he brings up the main outline and he gives 5 points of what we would want to cover. And he ends with a question. What are the main facets you would want to have discussed? So far, everything's really fair and equitable. Bill has made this request of his understanding of what he's wanting to do, and then, what he's wanting both sides to do, and then he immediately provides our side of it. So the next email is from Michelle, and it's June 21st, 3:30 a.m. So Michelle's staying up really late, or she's up really early. Again, this is Utah time, not India time. So she agrees. She says this is a helpful outline. I like the approach and the stated goal. I'll get right back to you today or tomorrow with some of the things that we'll want to ask and focus on from our end, and we can also look at scheduling. And then she does say, I'm also hoping this can be a productive and congenial exchange. So, right off the bat, we have agreement. We have agreement to what Bill proposes. I just want to point that out. Michelle sends the next email in this chain the next day at 11:30 p.m., basically asking if we can include Whitney Horning, who is also someone who has written books on taking the position that Joseph did not practice polygamy. And so she had talked to Whitney beforehand. Anyway, she wants Whitney to join in. So she says, your points sound great. She says, we're thinking that the way to make this discussion the most productive and worthwhile is if we can take 20 to 30 minutes to lay out a basic case so everyone has some points of reference to work from. Then we can spend the rest of the time with you guys poking holes in it and asking your questions, including those you listed, and see where the discussion leads. Does that sound good to you? So far, this seems to me like the same thing. I don't see really anything really different happening here. Then she says, if you would like me to send you a brief outline of the case we would want to take for, their first 20 to 30 minutes, let me know. And then she asks, what day and time are you wanting to record? And would it be live or via Zoom? Next email's from Bill. This is June 23rd, 9:41 a.m. He invites Michelle to go ahead and include Whitney in the email exchanges. In answer to her questions, he says, I would prefer to do it for Mormonism Live, which is on Wednesdays at 6:20 p.m. Mountain. It is live, and we do take live calls at the end. I'm okay with the format. You lay out your premises and conclusions, and we attempt to test them against what we think is a rational way to weigh the evidence and see where the conversation goes. So, again, everything's on track. Bill puts forth, again, for the second time now, Mormonism Live as the preferred venue. Michelle answers June 23rd, 2:36 p.m. And now, at this point, Whitney is included in the email. So this is going to Whitney, Jeremy, Bill, RFM, and myself. So Michelle, again, shows agreement. She says, I'm glad the format is agreeable to everyone. And then further on, I think a Mormonism Live sounds great. I'm assuming this will be over Zoom or StreamYard. Is that correct? Or would it be in person? What week are you thinking? We've looked at our schedules and we are all available July 12th, if that sounds good to you. So again, Michelle is agreeing to the format. She's agreeing to the show. And trying to move a schedule forward. That's really great. Email number 6, Bill says StreamYard. Okay, so this is still June 23rd. This is now 3:58 p.m. He says StreamYard. If you would send me a sort of outline in the opening area, then I will create an outline for the things that our side will want to ask. So yes, he is asking for an outline. He did technically ask for it in the beginning, but here he is asking for it again. And then a few hours later, Bill also responds again. And so, actually, before I get to that one, I'll just say again, Bill asks for the outline, right? And he promises to provide follow-up questions, which he's technically done already. In the very first email, already kind of provided our outline. So, yeah, email number 7, this one I'm about to get into, is Bill spelling out more about the land deed. So that's why I won't be going into as much detail. I will have them up on the screen so they can be fully read and looked at. But I'm going to point out just a few other things. In this email in particular, Bill provides a lot of information, a lot of sources, and a lot of links specifically. As he's going through these list of land deeds that he has, every single one of them is linked so that, Michelle and Whitney and Jeremy have the chance to directly look at what it is that Bill is looking at. So, to kind of go off on a tangent about our show or just about Bill and RFM in general, they really try hard to be reliable sources of information. Of course, being in the sphere that we're in, to faithful voices, just being on the outside is enough to discredit us to start with without even really looking at anything. But for every show, especially any kind of historical deep dive, they really do go out of their way to try to find original documents as much as possible and not just source them, in hyperlinks on the blog and sometimes on the YouTube page or description field, but also like putting them up on the screen so that people can see them and not just have to take Bill and RFM's word that it says that there. And I mean, even if like the writing is really bad on some of these, because some of these historical documents they're very difficult to read. So we'll still put up a readable text version, but also still provide the photograph and the source for those original documents. And that's always how they've been. They've always shown their work. And I think it's kind of the expected thing to do if you want to be respected or taken seriously at all. If you go into things like this, you provide sources, you provide links and citations. And so again, Bill and RFM always try really hard to do that and to show their work and make that available to people to be able to verify on their own. So you don't have to take Bill or RFM's word for what they are saying or where they're getting their ideas from. So the reason why I'm setting all of this up is because Bill in this email number 7, He says, "You named the following in your video for which I am not finding a deed. Can you please share where you found those deeds?" And then he asks for the site and for the URL to the deed itself. So this is referencing Michelle's episode 71, where she responded to our episode. And then Bill goes on and he lists all of the other women that Michelle brought up in her video, right? So here's the thing. Michelle did not provide the citations. Maybe they're there now, but at the timing of this, Michelle makes this list, but does not give sources for it. That is why Bill is asking here. And the reason why I'm pointing this out now is because I think rather quite unfairly, Michelle presents this more than once, presents Bill as being lazy, as being not willing to do work or not willing to do research, or basically asking and people from the Hemlock Knots Facebook group to do his work for him, do his research for him, be his little minions, which I think is a really unfair and unkind way to put this forward. So again, the reason why Bill has to ask in the first place is because this is a claim that she made on her video that she did not provide sources for. Okay, so that's number one. And then number two, Bill's intention when he was going to Hemlock Knots and making these posts, and he's asking for pushback. And a lot of people got really upset with Bill, and Bill admits that he can be pretty polemic. He can really be like a bulldog, just like chomping down on a bone. But the intent behind these posts to first of all put forth our side and ask for rebuttals, that's what critical thinking and analytical thinking involves, is looking for counter arguments, asking for counter arguments. So yeah, Bill did not find a lot of them particularly convincing, I guess, but and I feel like that's where people got the most upset at Bill. But again, and a lot of times he was asking for sources there too, because again, he's asking for counter arguments, he's getting them, but again, not source. So if you're making a claim or a rebuttal to what Bill is saying, I don't think it's a weird thing to ask for a source. So if I know information that that can be a good rebuttal to someone else's argument, I would expect that I should provide a source, or at least that if I don't provide a source for the information I have, that I think will turn around or change somebody's idea or position on something. If I don't provide that, I should completely understand if they, I guess, don't believe it necessarily, or take me up on that, or just accept it wholesale without a source. So again, I'm sorry I'm really digging into this so much, but I'm doing it for a reason. In Michelle's last episode, kind of going over all of this, I think she really, really paints Bill unfairly, and in a way that's just not representative of. It's interesting how I think what people normally would see as good scholarship and at least good attempts to engage in critical thinking, go outside of the echo chamber, right? Outside of our ideas, going to the people who have a different view and asking them for input. Most people would see that as a good thing. So it's just really fascinating to me that Bill gets vilified for this. And this is really honestly a constant theme that you will see throughout this email exchange, is the vilification of literally any act at all that in normal circumstances, I think if it weren't on this topic, and I think with this particular group of people for a particular reason, most people would see these as good faith actions. But yeah, in this, things get really, really twisted up. So here we go. Moving on. Bill asks for the URL, and then he lists the women that Michelle listed in her response video, and then he presents what he has found. And I just want to say, there are highlights in this if you are looking. Bill really puts a lot of time and thought into presenting this information and making it really easy to digest. So here's the next page. Again, just pointing out all of these D's he's listing by year. He's got every single name on here hyperlinked so that, again, Michelle and Jeremy and Whitney can look directly at what Bill is looking at. Again, this is all normal stuff. So here's another page. Again, just more lists, more deeds, more hyperlinks. So now we get to the end of the email, and Bill says, I will update this once I see the sources for the names that you've listed that I don't have, and also each deed is hyperlinked. And I want to point out one more thing, and that is this land deeds has been kind of Bill's pet project, at least in this particular area. As I mentioned before, he had done a previous episode about land deeds because and I tend to agree with him, that by looking at land deeds, he discovered a previously unknown potential plural wife of Joseph Smith that matches, again, these initials that we get from John Bennett, that other historians either didn't know who it was or misinterpret it to be somebody else. And the name on this particular land deed that Bill found seems to match the information better than what anyone else has done. So I think it's a new discovery and just something really interesting that Bill found by his research, again, going directly into the documents. So the fact that, again, painting him out to be like this lazy learner, right? Lazy learner, lazy researcher, not willing to look at things. When that's not the case, Bill has been swimming in and looking at these deeds, for months now. Like, it's not that it doesn't know where to look. I mean, at least not precisely for what Michelle listed, but it's just that the source that he was using for these deeds didn't have these women listed. So I think it was a legitimate question to ask Michelle. And again, she's the one that made the claim. She should have provided the resource. So yeah, and we'll more on that later. So email number 8 is just a correction from Bill. Email number 9 is again from Bill. This is now June 24th. This is 10 a.m. Okay, so Bill, again, I think just trying to make sure things are all good. He says, by the way, I'm not trying to be confrontational here. Rather, I believe I grasp how critical thinking works and why certain kinds of evidence carry more weight than others, and we want to show our work here so that you are not caught off guard and can offer the best explanations possible, but not dismiss evidence because you aren't seeing how damaging that evidence is to your case. Because during the show, we would want to give a high-level explanation of this data about the deeds and clearly explain to the audience why this is so significant. There needs to be a rational explanation besides coincidence or saying that there's nothing to see here. So again, Bill is reiterating the point of sharing information back and forth, right? Both sides know each other's side ahead of time. And again, just this gives each other like the ability to have the best response, okay? And then the second thing that's happening here is Bill is pointing out a concern, a very legitimate one, that the evidence will just be dismissed outright. And that is exactly what's already happening. So I think that's maybe why he's putting in this in here. But it's also a really common behavior too. So I guess it's just not really surprising or unexpected for these kinds of things. Bill's used to being dismissed when he thinks he's got some pretty good slam dunk stuff here. So the value in having Whitney and Jeremy and Michelle on the show to really go into this is to give Bill the chance to push back and say, what is your answer for this? I would really like to know how you reconcile this. Okay, so this is going to be a major theme throughout these emails. So again, despite agreeing everything so far, there have not cropped up any real problems or issues. That is definitely going to change. But yeah, again, despite agreeing to everything beforehand, it's just, how do I say this? If there's any chance at all to take offense at what Bill says, it is absolutely taken. I think just like every step of the way here, and this is one already. So if you've seen Michelle's episode, she gets kind of snarky here. When Bill says, "I believe I grasp how critical thinking works and why certain kinds of evidence carry more weight than others." And so Michelle sees this as kind of an underhanded insult.
He's basically asserting that he, unlike us, understands how critical thinking works.
Which is not what Bill said at all, but that is how she took it. And when he says that, so that you're not caught off guard, she also takes that as kind of a patronizing comment, as if they, have the weaker position, or just kind of like need all the help that they can get. And while we do think they have the weaker position, that's not the point of what Bill is saying here. And again, this is Michelle will, it's coming up. Michelle will say multiple times, right? Express concerns about gotchas, right? This idea that really wanting to avoid anyone trying to do that. It's clear that she fears that that's what we are trying to do. And so this is just yet one of many, many places where there's really a double standard going on here. So, there's this fear and concern that there's going to be gotchas, which again, the way around that is by sharing information ahead of time, both sides. Then there's no gotchas. Then you don't have to worry about it, right? But when Bill puts this forward, we want to show our work so that you're not caught off guard, so that you have everything you need. Like, it's so that there's no gotcha. But again, this is kind of, it's just twisted into just kind of being mean, like oh, but this is for you. And Bill doesn't say it here. He will say it later, so maybe I should just get to it. But this isn't just one-sided and one way. This is supposed to be equal on both sides. So we are also wanting and expecting the same thing. We also don't want a gotcha from their side, even an inadvertent one where they, maybe bring up some evidence or bring up a source that they didn't bring up before and we haven't had time to vet or actually verify or look into or research. That's avoidance of this kind of gotcha. That's the point of planning it out beforehand, like Bill asked for and they agreed to. It's just, again, it's just, I don't know why they're taking offense at this, but they do, and you can clearly see that in her video. So, he explains that there needs to be a rational explanation, and again, Michelle's really making this as like he's being really insistent, and like she right off the bat she's just like, Bill's basically being like, admit you're wrong here, and I think that's really unfair because Bill is really, really convinced by these land deeds. And he really wants a good answer. That is what's happening here. So I'm going to read a little bit more from the email, okay? And I think it should be obvious to be able to see that. He says, whatever answers you come up with must be more reasonable than the critical conclusion to your argument. In other words, rational thinking requires the observer to all of this to select the conclusion that requires the least amount of inference, allowances, or conjecture. So to Bill, where he is sitting right now, he is not seeing that there is a good counter argument that is better than this one. Again, kind of taking the Occam's razor, right? The conclusion that requires the least amount of inference in addition to have to make it work. So he's really wanting them to bring their best. And so that's what he says. I want you to be prepared for it. This is a significant hurdle. This is something that really needs to be adequately addressed for Bill. And again, this is painted out as just being like really mean and like it makes no sense because it's quite literally what the whole episode is supposed to be about. It's literally the point of the collaboration is for both sides to bring the evidences that they find really compelling and have it respected and taken seriously by the other side. So that's all that Bill is expressing here, and it just offense is taken at it. Couple more things. He just goes into more of again, what our side is. Bill is being very open, upfront, and giving on our position, our side of things. He says, we are also going to emphasize the Nauvoo High Council minutes and affidavits. That was RFM's thing. And we're going to reference the City Council minutes. So there's more. I'm skipping it. But again, he summarizes again and provides kind of a little bit more of a filled out outline of our side and what we want them to respond to. So he says, our line of questioning will challenge you on the following points. And he numbers them out, okay, 1 through 8. And he says, I totally get there's a different set of evidence of Smith denying polygamy. Isn't all of it explained within the shroud of secrecy that is clearly going on? He goes on to ask, again, nicely, there's no real conflict here, no need for there to be any conflict. He just asks, what are we missing? What are the obstacles that our side has to overcome besides children not being discovered? And that's not a dismissive comment, by the way. That is an acknowledgement that we understand that is one of the significant hurdles for them. So besides that one, what else? Okay, he goes on to ask some further questions, and then asks again, what are other barriers our side must overcome? I hope this helps you guys prepare. So again, really nothing to see here. But if you watch Michelle's video, she just rips this apart, and it's just really astonishing to me. So Bill sends up, he's the next email again. This is email number 10, June 24th, 10:11 a.m. He responds to the dates. The 19th of July or the 2nd of August would be the earliest dates that we have available. So just to recap, they had put forth July 12th, and that was too early. Bill does say, I hope this helps you guys prepare. Again, this isn't mean-spirited at all. It's the spirit of collaboration and working together. And he doesn't say it here, although maybe he could have, is how nice it would be for them to return the favor and do the same for us, that Bill has done for them, completely living up to our side of the agreement right off the bat, right from the get-go. And so Michelle responds, also June 24th, 12:50 p.m. She says, okay, it sounds like August 2nd is our day, so let's plan on that. So that's good. We have a date. Awesome. We're settled on that. And then she goes on further. We finally get some arguments. Basically an index card version of an outline, but it's something. It's something. And it's the only thing. It's a start, and it's also quite literally the end of what we are going to end up getting from them on this side. And so I'll go ahead. It's just 5 points, and this could be a whole separate topic, but already right out of the gate, I find them to be incredibly inferior, especially compared to what Bill has laid out, because he's giving specific arguments, like this is the evidence that I have, and this is what it implies, right? These are extremely generic, so I'm going to read them out to you. Number 1, problems with Doctrine and Covenants 132. Number 2, no evidence of marriage or sexuality. Number 3, Joseph's, Emma's, and Hiram's words and actions. Number 4, evidence of corruption, forgery, and fraud. Number 5, motivation and bias of all evidence tying Joseph to polygamy. I'm sure you all will have many questions on each of those points, which I think will make for a great discussion for the rest of the show. So we definitely are going to have a lot of questions because this is just almost nothing to really go off of. This is extremely generic. No actual arguments or evidences are presented here. So we're going to need a little bit more than that. But again, it's something. So Bill is the next email. This is number 12, June 24th, 1:12 p.m. Bill asks, in the meantime, will you please pass along your source material for the names and deeds that I sent for which I couldn't find. So again, this is a repeated question because it has not been answered, and again, it had to be asked in the first place because it wasn't provided where it could have been provided. Something else that Michelle does in her video is really paint Bill out to be this just like really impatient and demanding person, which I think is an unfair misrepresentation of him, and really a stretch to do. And I can't remember if this is one of the emails she does it on, but I'll bring it up here anyway. At no point in any of these emails does Bill demand immediate responses, or nor does he demand that everyone like drop everything they're doing and like run to his beck and call. She says that more than once, and it just baffles me. I don't know why she did that. She took on this kind of like, we're busy people, I don't exist for you, I'm not here at your beck and call. It's like, that's true, but I just don't see how she sees Bill as like remotely acting in any kind of a way to show that's what he's expecting. And this is yet another source of some double standards going on here, because when the she was on the other foot and Bill is not responding as quickly as Michelle would like, she does send an email kind of commenting on it, and in her video she characterizes it as Bill like ignoring her. So it's really damned if you do, damned if you don't here. There's just the standards are not equal for both sides, and so I'm just going to point that out here. So yeah, and then as you can see, at this point, Michelle is not offended by that, or if she is upset at him for daring to ask the question, for her to provide sources for claims that she has already made publicly, she's at least hiding it here in these emails. And so next email is from her, June 24th, 1:27 p.m. She says, "Oh, sure. On the Joseph Smith papers, you can find the trustees' land books A and B, which provide a concise list of deeds and lot transfers." So, so she finally provided something, which is nice. Again, not linked, but it's enough of information that this does give Bill enough of what he needs to be able to finally find this on his own. So it turns out it's basically like a ledger book. So while Bill, the section of the Joseph Smith papers that Bill was in was the deeds themselves, Michelle found this from the ledger book. So that's why Bill was not able to find what it was that she was talking about. So yeah, so here she has no problem handing that out, although again, I might put forward a little bit lazy because she doesn't do the bare minimum that Bill has done multiple times in giving like the actual URL for the source. So yeah, so she's kind of making Bill do more legwork unnecessarily that she doesn't have to do when it comes to our claims. Just pointing that out. So next in line chronologically, we have RFM's response to Michelle, which really ruffles up some feathers. So this was June 25th. This is Radio Free Mormon 286, titled "No Ma'am, That's Not History." It's kind of funny because it is a play off of the pamphlet that Hugh Nibley wrote in response to Fawn Brody's "No Man Knows My History," the premiere biography of Joseph Smith that revealed a lot of the more unsavory things about his life and career that were basically hidden from membership of the church for the majority of it. So anyway, RFM liked it, and the reason why he did this, even though it kind of sort of puts him in the place of Hugh Nibley, which we would say is the inferior position to Fawn Brody, the point of it is that it really isn't history, and the reason why he named that was basically because of Michelle's responses to a couple of the evidences that we brought up were to entirely create new stories out of whole cloth. No evidence, no documents, just pure imagination and just really, quite frankly, conspiracy. She created a conspiratorial narrative to fill in the blanks, to bring in extra villains and dealings behind the scenes, again, which there's absolutely no evidence for. So that's why RFM titled this, "No Ma'am, That's Not History." So again, I think there were really a lot of valid criticisms about Michelle's episode. I have a lot of my own, but that's maybe for another day if I feel like talking about this more. So RFM goes through, he summarizes things, he plays a lot of clips from her directly, which she ends up saying like that he misrepresents her a lot, and she accuses Bill and RFM quite often of misrepresenting her arguments, even when clips of her are used, like directly saying, what she has said. And I find that the majority of the time she makes this accusation that, no, that's a straw man, or no, you misrepresented that, she doesn't actually provide a correction. It's fascinating. I guess if you've watched it, you could, see if you saw that, or if you haven't, watch it and see if that's a pattern that you notice. So, moving on. Okay, so suffice it to say, RFM is less than impressed with Michelle's response and the level of scholarship behind it and the points that she brings up, and so he responds to that. Again, this is something that's I don't think should be really unexpected or considered to be personal. Of course, Michelle is going to take everything quite personally, but in this space, when you make arguments, I think it's kind of normal to expect that people are going to disagree with you. Michelle just does initially kind of a quick, really short response, 5 or 6 minutes. It's not a full episode. This is also June 25th, same day that his podcast went out, and it's titled "RFM Said What?" ? And then a big LOL. And she promises to, basically give more information. So, a few days later, June 29th, Bill basically does the same thing RFM did earlier, where he did a standalone episode, about the affidavits on his own show. Bill creates a podcast episode for his Mormon Discussions podcast, episode 388, The Smoking Gun of Joseph's Polygamy, and he goes over the land deeds. So again, this is just something that Bill and RFM do. They have more than one platform, and so repurposing content for those who may watch one show but not the other, putting that out there is not a really weird thing, but it's clear that Michelle kind of sees this as like a barrage of attacks, when really, again, it's the same arguments, it's just repurposed, it's put in different places. And again, I just want to point out that Bill's side of things is Bill really thinks that the land deeds are a significant case, against the idea that Joseph did not start polygamy, and he really wants this research, I guess, to be acknowledged and taken legitimately, even if it's disagreed with, taken legitimately and given the courtesy of an actual decent answer. Okay? Moving on, back to the emails. So this is email number 14 in the chain, June 29th, 4:12 p.m. Bill says, I did an episode today explaining the conundrum of the land deeds in detail. I think it's a serious issue, and I would love to hear how your side reconciles such reasonably. Again, these are not personal attacks, but Michelle really sees them that way. And again, if you see in her episode, just by Bill kind of bringing this up again, because again, so far, no rebuttal has really been provided. So I just don't know why. I do know why. I feel like I know why. I have my suspicions, I guess. But Michelle, again, chooses to paint Bill as this just awful, demanding, malicious person, and instead of really seeing any seriousness behind his question here. I think this is a legitimate, serious issue. I really want to know how you reconcile this information. She just views it as an attack and a demand that they just throw in the towel now and admit they're wrong. And I hope it's clear to any neutral observer that that's not at all what's happening here. So again, Bill Reel provides links to the show. So again, I'm always providing his sources so people can see what they're looking at. And he also goes ahead and he provides the link to Radio Free Mormon 284, the Mormon Polygamy controversy that he released a week or so earlier. So at this point, there starts to be a misunderstanding. So again, Bill is off in the Facebook group Hemlock Knots. They're going back and forth, and I'm not privy to what's happening there. Just I do know that communications are kind of breaking down. So I think it's initially there that Bill at least first gets the idea that maybe Michelle isn't interested. So he puts that here in the email. He says, if I understand correctly, Michelle, you are no longer seemingly interested in a recorded conversation. It's not an attack. It's just a simple question, just a check-in to see if he's understanding things correctly. Back to the email. Whitney and Jeremy, I'm hopeful that you two are still interested. I also noticed that I am giving you all of the evidence and the arguments that I have within our side. I would very much appreciate understanding better your side, namely what you see as strong evidence that Joseph Smith did not practice polygamy, and how you reconcile the points that we are making. This will allow us to better get to the heart of the matter in a recorded conversation where we perceive misunderstandings versus, what is actually a bad argument. Communication hasn't really quite started to break down here yet. It's about to kind of take a left turn here. But again, I want to point out that Bill is simply trying to move forward politely here. He's not going on the attack for Michelle, seeming to change her mind. He's just checking in with her and also Whitney and Jeremy if they're still interested. And then he states again, okay, the purpose of the exchange of information beforehand, right? To iron out misunderstandings, because like I said, like in Michelle's 5-minute video, she accuses RFM of just misunderstanding, misconstruing everything, and kind of makes it look deliberate, that he's straw-manning every argument, etc. She's going to respond. That's all we get. So he's putting forward the purpose of doing this beforehand is so that this kind of misunderstanding or misconstruing doesn't happen on the live show, because we've worked it out beforehand. So if we're inadvertently misrepresenting an argument, a conversation beforehand can fix that so that when we all come to the show, we're all on the same page as far as like our side, and as well as understanding the other side to their satisfaction. So Bill points that out, and then also points out, I think quite kindly, not demandingly at all, that he has provided everything from our side and would very much appreciate understanding their side better and wanting to see what their strong evidence is. Again, I can't, it's amazing to me that these requests from Bill are painted out to be like just such malicious demands, when again, this is the agreement that from the very first email from Bill and the first response from Michelle, like agreeing to this format and finding no problem with it, to then, in the response just being like, Bill's just this evil, awful, demanding guy. And we're going to see multiple times throughout this chain that they're going to constantly accuse our side of not taking them seriously, not taking their evidence seriously, not being willing to see their side of things, or at least willing to see why they feel compelled by the evidence that they have, even if we disagree. They will say this a lot, but right here, like from the get-go, Bill is saying it first. He's asking for this. So they're going to demand that Bill treat them this particular way, moving forward, but he already is, right? It's right here. I would very much appreciate understanding better your side, namely what you see as strong evidence that Joseph Smith did not practice polygamy and how you reconcile the points we are making, right? Bill is asking, he's inviting them, please show me your side so that I can understand you better. I just really want to highlight that and have you just kind of keep that in mind as we go throughout these conversations. And I'm going to try to go through them a little bit faster. Sorry, we're already an hour in. It's definitely this is going to be a long one. And if RFM doesn't make at least 3 mentions of the length of this, then I will feel personally hurt. I was kind of confused by this because, again, I am not in the Hemlock Knots Facebook group at this point. And so I sent a text message out. So this is from me. And I'm asking, so Michelle really pulled out of coming on the show. What about Jeremy and Whitney? And then Bill says, I just emailed you a follow-up. And then I let him know that Michelle answered pretty quickly already. So, so that last email from Bill, checking in, that was June 29th for 12 p.m. It's literally 3 minutes later. So that's why in my text I say, like, Michelle answered pretty quickly because she does. So June 29th, 4:15 p.m. She says, I'm not uninterested in recording an episode. I've been confused why you've wanted to have an in-person discussion rather than ask and answer questions online. Now, this is kind of, I guess, the first point that there seems to be a question or some confusion going on here. Okay, and so I want to point out, I'm going to say that a lot here. I'm pointing out again that Bill has already said, I think at least twice already, if not potentially 3 times in the previous emails, like mentioned having a discussion beforehand to get all of these things, issues, misunderstandings, presenting each other's evidence and information all beforehand so that the live show can be succinct and streamlined and just, really as put together as it possibly can be for a show that's going to be live. So this is the first time that, again, Michelle's confused why you want to have an in-person discussion rather than online. So Bill answers that, June 29th, 4:22 p.m. He points out it takes significantly longer and too much room to avoid the crux of the problems and deflect. Again, Bill is no stranger to this. He's been around the block a few times with people who are apologists for a poor position. He knows that deflection is common. Again, it's already happening. It's already happening here. So again, he explains it. He explains why. And then he says, I'm confused why you're unwilling to talk face to face. And again, we're talking about a StreamYard, pre-planning, hashing out, preparation before the actual thing. So this is where the first wrench kind of gets thrown in here. Michelle, despite previously agreeing to Bill putting out this, kind of pre-planning episode, now she's confused about it all of a sudden, rather than just going through email. Bill explains why it's too easy to, avoid or talk past each other, miss things, deflect, and expresses, why don't you want to talk about it? So Michelle answers that she'll respond more later. The next is from Bill. This is June 30th, 12:43. He said, I look forward to hearing back from you. Moving on. Okay, actually, I'm going to pause here. So the next email is going to be from Whitney Horning. This will be her first introduction into this email exchange. And it really, really changes the tone here. And so, again, I do want to point out, like with RFM's episode, the Mormon Polygamy controversy, and also the No Ma'am, That's Not History, he does put forward, again, which has been his belief all along, spoken and out there for the public, that he finds this position, that Joseph did not start polygamy to be a faith-based one, to be conspiratorial, and really, if he had his choice in this, he would not have been engaging it as much as, if Bill hadn't kind of started this chain going. And the conspiracy term, it's the C word, is something that's obviously, this will come up multiple times, extremely triggering to the other side, and they find really distasteful. However, it means something, right? I don't. We will see that Michelle and Whitney and Jeremy are determined to see this C word as ad hominem, as poisoning the well, as just a derogatory term. And in some cases, it can be, but it's not wholly undeserved. The reason why conspiratorial thinkers are looked down on is because conspiratorial thinking is not critical thinking. It is a completely different type. It's extremely biased. It's really the opposite of critical and analytical thinking. And so if you are displaying that kind of thinking, if your behavior, if your arguments, if all of the things that you are producing and putting out there falls in line with the behavioral patterns of conspiracy theorists, then it's a deserved label. Okay? Like, words mean things. It's a descriptor. It's a definition. It's definitive. So if you are doing things that, this word describes, then you are that word. And if there's some negative connotations to it, again, there's a reason. The connotations are not attached to the label. They're attached to the behavior that the label is describing. This is just going to completely go over their heads. They're going to be really upset about it. But I just want to point that out. I'm not sorry. It is my belief that it is conspiratorial. I'm not sorry for thinking it. It's not malicious. It's a legitimate opinion based on what I see as patterns of behavior. So if you really dislike that and you really want to prove otherwise, I guess there's two suggestions. One is don't act like that. And two, bring evidence. Bring your evidence and let that speak for you, rather than, again, problematic behaviors. But instead, we're going to get the problematic behaviors. So the reason I'm pulling all of this up, because I think this is where kind of Whitney comes in, as she joins in, completely changing the tone. Right off the bat, it's clear that it's over the accusations, basically, that this is a conspiratorial position, which it is. So here we go. Email number 19 from Whitney Horning, June 30th, 6:47 p.m. I am assuming that each of you is fully aware of the rich irony of your position on the land deeds, and that you believe us too ignorant to notice. Wow. Continuing on. Perhaps you believe that our tinfoil hat and large cardboard signs that read "the moon landing was a hoax" are affecting our ability to comprehend a matter with intelligence and soundness. And then she adds a little winky face. Attended Deseret Books event last evening celebrating the conclusion of the Joseph Smith Papers project. One of the lead historians stated that the LDS Church's history should not be considered comprehensive, relating to both the history being complete as well as to understanding. He then said, "Historians speculate. I urge everyone to speculate responsibly." Whitney. P.S. Not that it should matter, but I do believe that Neil Armstrong landed on the moon, just as he said he did. To illustrate a point, if Neil Armstrong, his wife, and his brother had spent their entire lives denying that Neil had landed on the moon, stating that those who claimed he had were lying, then I would be inclined to investigate the matter more thoroughly and to believe them. Okay. There's a lot going on here. this first sentence is really telling. Okay, so I'm sure it's just as clear to everyone else the intense passive aggressiveness that is coming off here, which is a very Mormon thing. This is a known Mormon trait because of certain beliefs about conflict and etc. Passive aggressive is the way that Mormons typically do aggressive, and I think I'm quite good at it from my lifetime in the church. I can be passive aggressive as hell, but this is like this is impressive. I guess I'll just say that. So, besides the passive aggressiveness, so there's a lot more going on here, and I'm going to, as we go through these emails, I'm going to make the case for conspiratorial, right? I've already asserted that they are behaving conspiratorially. I'm going to be pointing it out, from their behavior in the ways that they are doing that. So, one huge aspect of the kind of thinking in conspiracy circles, in conspiracy thinking, is a huge persecution complex. All right, it's a very black and white, heroes and villains, us against the world kind of thinking, where just a lot of kind of neutral positions, mistakes, or just like people just being people is really, there's not really a lot of space for that. You're either an innocent person or you are part of like the malicious villain on the outside. And when you watch Michelle's videos, you watch for this. There is more than once a constant, what's the word I'm looking for? Conflagration, or there's a constant association between the, what they view as the conspirators, Brigham Young, Willard Richards, John Taylor. These are the villains in Joseph Smith's day that are setting him up, that are lying about him, that are practicing polygamy, right? These are the main bad guys and villains. And in this modern kind of argument where it's just we have a different opinion, Bill and RFM and I, on as outsiders, we are not faithful members of the church anymore, but we do believe that this is something that Joseph started. The polygamy is from Joseph. So we are painted out to be often kind of in the same sentence, actually, like lumped together with the conspirators of Joseph Smith's day. And I think that is significant. It's not an accident. And I'm not saying like it's being deliberately done maliciously. It's just the kind of thinking that their side is trapped in, because it's conspiratorial thinking, that there really isn't a divide between the historical conspirators back then, versus again today. We are made out to be conspirators, and this will be made abundantly clear also in the emails. Stories can and absolutely will be made up about each one of us to turn us into people who behind the scenes are really deliberately, maliciously setting up traps and gotchas and pieces and doing all of this. And so I think that's really significant. Again, watch Michelle's videos. She does this more than once. We're just put into the same group. And so it should make sense, I think. Just this is kind of the background to their thinking and to their views of us that's kind of underlying the whole thing. So despite the attempts they make to dialogue with us, what is underlying this whole thing is really a strong view of us as villains. There's really just no escape from, because again, it's there. This is not a rationality based conclusion. This is not critical or analytical thinking. This is conspiratorial thinking. It's you are the villains and we are the good people. We're the either the heroes and or the victims of this story. So that's number one. That is something that is really common in a lot of conspiracy circles. Usually the bad guys are the government or NASA or whoever, United Order, this kind of stuff, right? There's this deliberate effort going on, like behind the scenes, right, to muddy it up and hurt the good guys. So okay, so there's that. And we see this already here, again, this very first line. So back to the email. I completely missed this actually until I was going through and preparing for this episode, because what hit me in the face, first of all, was just the astonishing level of passive aggressiveness here. So this was a newer thing to me, like long after the fact. I am assuming, again, I'm reading from the email from Whitney, I'm assuming that each of you is fully aware of the rich irony of your position on the land deeds. So this is an accusation here, right? That we are aware of the irony of our position on land deeds. Basically, I think what Whitney is saying here is that she sees a huge flaw in this argument. There is a problem with this, and that it's not at all the slam dunk that Bill thinks it is. So already we have here a removal from Bill of any like genuine feelings or genuine thinking here. And again, I'm going to remind you that they are going to say and demand quite often that Bill at least see them as legitimate and genuine in their beliefs, when again they are not willing to do that in reverse. So already, at least for Whitney, in this email, she is pulling that away. She says you're aware of the irony of your positions and that you believe us too ignorant to notice. So it's not just that you do know, like this is not a legitimate belief of yours, Bill. You know that there's a problem. You know it's a stupid take, for whatever reason, but you think we're too stupid to notice. And boy, is that a hot take. Just, again, right out of the gate, this is how Whitney decides to join the conversation. You're not sincere, and you think we're too stupid to notice. So, again, there's this us versus them, victims versus villains, and that is what's happening here. I mean, and this happens a lot too. Like they will constantly kind of put words and accusations in our mouths. You don't think we're legitimate, you think we're stupid, you think we're idiots, here you think we're ignorant, we're unintelligent. All these words, majority come from them. So yes, in our episodes, do we maybe ridicule some of their arguments? Yes. Do we disagree with their position? Yes. Do we think it's faith-based? Yes, and they admit it is, so when it's convenient for them. But then when they want to be in this persecution complex, then all of a sudden it's just a big, horrible, nasty thing to be pointing out, something that they have actually said themselves. Anyway, so again, it's kind of like a reverse, it's the kind of the Darvo, reverse victim offender. It's just, I don't know, it's just constantly putting insults to them in our mouths that we have not done and we have not said. They're telling us that we don't think that they're intelligent or sound. And look, it's not about intelligence. RFM already said this. At this point, he has already put it out there, and I think it was put out in the original episode. This is not about intelligence. As human beings, we are prone to all kinds of irrational thinking. That's why we have created tools, scientific method, that's why we study fallacies. That's why we try to come up with methodologies to try to circumvent that bias. And if you really are interested in truth, then you can do it by learning these strategies, learning the pitfalls of critical thinking and analytical reasoning. You can avoid a lot of the inherent biases that we have. Again, you have to try because it's what's natural for us to do, but it's not that there's no tools to try to get around this. So, and also, again, coming from Mormonism in general, a lot of us have a lot of shame and guilt about the really silly things that we believed previously. And it's a pretty common refrain, look, people will say, how can Mormons be so stupid as to believe this, that, or the other? And sometimes we ask ourselves this: how could I have been so stupid as to have believed this, that, or the other thing, right? And again, it's not about intelligence. Incredibly intelligent people can fall for cults, can fall for scams, can fall for conspiratorial thinking. So we've already said that. That's already been put out there, but it's just something that they're going to come back to. So, okay, let's keep going. I could get into this analogy. I think it's a very poor one. I'll just leave it as is. So now that Whitney has joined in, Jeremy joins in, and let's see the tone he takes. June 30th, 7:01 p.m. He says, I second Whitney's thoughts. When I first reached out, my question was, could we have a productive discussion, epithet and ad hominem free? So far, that's not been the case. Instead of arguing merely on the merits, you've chosen to paint us with the same brush as Holocaust deniers get, or flat earthers get. Hard to feel that a productive conversation can happen in that environment. Contempt and ridicule don't tend to lead to a convivial atmosphere. Should we find our own characterization for your side? Polygamy embracers? Polygamy promoters? To be very clear, we are not at all opposed to or afraid of any part of the discussion. As far as the multiple smoking guns that you've presented, we believe we have a rational and ultimately, we believe, superior response. We'll let the audience decide, but we do not see the magnitude of your deed argument, nor the expositor affidavit argument, to name just those two. We recognize the sophistication of what you put forward, but we have a very different view based on the data. I still put forward my original question, can we have a productive discussion? First of all, I want to point out here to give Jeremy at least a little bit of credit. He is able to grant, at least right here, something that they demand from us, which in the previous email Whitney did not do, which is seemingly to understand Bill's argument. So in the second paragraph here, Jeremy says, we recognize the sophistication of what you put forward, okay? So I think, at least it seems at this point, Jeremy does not take Whitney's view that this is a disingenuous argument and that Bill knows it and he's just relying on them to be too stupid to see. He doesn't quite go that far. Again, they're really upset about the conspiracy accusation. And again, I have to say, this is not something that's going to change. They want to argue this over and over and over. And even at one point, Michelle acknowledges that that she understands that maybe she won't change her opinion on this. And again, it's just constant double standards and back and forth, or just maybe just saying things and then the behavior doesn't follow. So if Michelle and the others do understand that we do think this, we do think that this is they are portraying patterns of conspiratorial thinking and behavior, that they're not going to change that, then move on, right? Why continue to bring it up? Okay. It slows down the conversation, and they do it multiple times in this email. It just pulls everything to a screeching halt because they want to play victim and complain about this. And again, I want to say, number one, if the shoe fits, hun, it does. You are just, I guess, confirming the bias, all right? If this is indeed a bias and an undeserved one, everything they do really feeds into that. So, so let's keep going. Let's see how Bill handles these really negative, passive-aggressive emails. Okay. He says, sure. Hence why I'm hoping for someone to acknowledge the issue rather than dismiss it as I have seen thus far. I welcome thoughts on how to reconcile. These are just conclusions about history. The land deeds are deeply contradictory to your conclusion, and I'm waiting for someone to acknowledge the reality of that and confront it without dismissal and belief persistence. Maven interjecting here, I think that's reasonable. Again, this is what we're seeing. Dismissal. He goes on to say, is the problem real? If you must reevaluate your premises, is it not simply more rational to look at this with new eyes, allowing yourself to see the other side's premises as being more sound than yours? To keep the current conclusion, how much inference and conjecture must be added? Next email, number 22, June 30th, 7:28 p.m. from Bill Reel. He asks, let's talk all this out loud. Okay, again, it's another repeated request to have a conversation to try to hash these things out, all right? Michelle answers next, about an hour and a half later, still June 30th, 8:56 p.m. And now Michelle takes on the tone as the rest of them. She says, Bill, the problem I see is that this and the interactions on Facebook don't feel like a conversation. A conversation generally implies actually trying to understand the other side and respond. That has not been my experience with our interactions. I have pointed out several serious flaws in your analysis, but you don't respond to any of them. Instead, it's just admit you're wrong, without even an acknowledgement of the very reasonable points I have made. I understand the likelihood we will agree on this is low, but if you don't even respond to my comments and try to make your case for why they aren't valid, how is that a conversation? Pause here. Again, more astounding double standards or hypocrisy, because this is literally what is happening to Bill. Bill is putting out, her interpretations of this data, right? It's astonishing to me that in a conversation where these guys are continuously are not responding and making a case for why they aren't valid, Michelle is here basically making that accusation back and saying, how is this a conversation? You're not even responding, right? And so she is saying, I did respond, right, in the Facebook comments, not here in this email, which is where this is where we're supposed to be working all of this out, right? So I don't know, maybe embedded in these Facebook posts, there's a slam dunk comment, and Michelle has chosen to put it there, rather than put it here in the outline, like we've asked for, like she agreed to multiple times, and Bill has requested again and again and again and again to include here. It's not here, so I don't know what this slam dunk argument is. But she's upset that Bill doesn't answer, and I just want to point out there are also Facebook posts of Bill's and RFM's that Michelle doesn't answer, and I'm going to put forward that Facebook, while I think it was a good idea, I understand why Bill went to Facebook to kind of point out these arguments and ask for pushback, ask for, contradictory evidence, counterpoints, etc. Once the comments on a Facebook post start to get really long, Facebook starts to really truncate them and make it extremely difficult to follow and read through because it just collapses so many. And so even if you get a notification that someone has directly responded to a comment of yours, again, if it's starting to be on what's a really long thread, even if you click that specific notification, this is my experience at least, when Facebook takes you to the post, it doesn't necessarily uncollapse and open up the comment that notification is about. So it truncates things. So you have to change the settings to first of all show all the comments, and then you really have to peruse through and open up several threads to try to search out and find where this is. So the fact that both sides put stuff out on Facebook and feel like that they have not gotten responses is a completely understandable one to me. I think there's a big problem with the format of trying to do a back and forth on Facebook is worse than a back and forth in email. So yeah, that's what's happening here. But of course, Michelle's going to see this as deliberate ignoring and deliberate maliciousness on Bill's part. And again, maybe it's projection because they continuously ignore Bill's points. They're not responding to them here. And so, yeah, so again, we're going to put that on Bill though. She says, I didn't do a response to either podcast, but I hope you both do recognize that I tried very hard to honestly and fairly represent your arguments without strawmanning them at all. That is not what I have seen in reverse. I'm going to pause here again and just say, agree to disagree, Michelle, I guess because what stood out to me the most about her podcast, her initial, was more straw man than I can count, more misrepresentation than I can count. It was bad. It was, I did not think it was a good episode at all. I didn't think she really hardly actually answered anything. She skipped a lot of things, and the things she did answer, as pointed out before, made up entirely new stories, just completely out of whole cloth. Or again, just dismiss things out of hand. It was not a good one. And there were just so many straw men. That could be an entire multi-hour long podcast on its own just to go through the straw man in that one episode that she did, and then even longer if we pull in her later episode. So again, right, it's this lack of self-awareness, which again I contribute to the conspiratorial thinking that we're the good guys, we're the innocent, the pure, we're working upstream, we're working against the established narrative. We're the persecuted ones, and everyone else out there are just villains. They're just rotten. So what she says here, I believe that Michelle thinks she's representing herself honestly here to say that she tried to fairly represent our arguments without strawmanning them at all. I think the desire is there, but the capability to live up to her opinion of herself is not there at all. It's not even like, oh, she made some mistakes here and there. it was bad. It was really bad. I don't know if she, off the top, I'm sure there's any argument that she represented accurately, I would say would be an exception rather than the rule. The rule to me was a lot of straw manning. So anyway, but very clearly that's not her perception. To keep going, more upset at the conspiracy stuff. The central point has been the ad hominem of conspiracy theorists and then a very dishonest misrepresentation of my actual points. I honestly am hoping for a conversation because I think it would be valuable. I think it's important to discuss things like this, but it is only valuable when both sides start from the framework of at least assuming goodwill and rationality on the other side. Pause there again. This is not what they are doing for us. And I will show from the get-go, from the very, very, very beginning, there has been nothing but suspicion on their side when it comes to their interactions with us. From the get-go. And without any reason to at all. It's already built in. And again, I'm going to say, I think this is because of conspiratorial thinking. This is part of this pattern of behavior and thinking that they are really locked into at this point. And it's not one based in incredible rational thinking. Again, I'm not saying that they're idiots. I'm not saying that they're unintelligent people, because intelligent people can fall for false things. It happens all the time. That is what's happening here, and I do think they are kind of locked into certain patterns of behavior and thinking that are antithetical to critical and analytical thought. Anyway, so again, just some hypocrisy here. Conversation's only valuable when both sides start from the framework of at least assuming goodwill and rationality on the other side. We did start with that framework. They never did, and I will back that up. So she goes on to say, treating this as if it's only an emotional issue or a conspiracy theory or any other tactic to minimize people who have looked hard at the evidence and become convinced, sometimes despite our longstanding assumptions or desires. I, for one, didn't want to be here. It does little other than insult people on our side and create greater division. Let me address this first. As I said before, conspiracy theorist is really a sore term for them, and they bring this up so much. I don't know what they're wanting out of us, really, here. I think they're wanting us to, to stop using the term. But again, it's a descriptive term for real patterns of behavior that they are displaying. So just first of all, it's not going to happen as long as they continue to do that. And then secondly, okay, so when they say, they want this conversation, right, to happen, and they're like, it can't happen if you're calling us conspiracy theorists. Yes, it can. Yes, it can. We can believe that you are conspiracy theorists and still have a dialogue where we both present the evidence on each other's side. But what's required here is for you guys to present your evidence. And that's what you are not doing. So it's just, I just feel like it's really a wrench every time they try to come back to this ad hominem, this conspiracy, whatever. They are stopping the progress. Because they're choosing to take this drama, dramatic persecution, playing this out for the stage, rather than just coming to the table with their arguments and evidence and their logic as they see it, as we've asked for, as they want us to see, like they demand that we see, but they just won't bring it. It's just astounding. And it's so frustrating, and this is going to happen so many times. So I'm going to make the case that I'm doubling down on this conspiracy theorist, and it's going to be mainly from their emails, their behavior, their words, their podcasts, their side that is absolutely living up to this description, and it's deserved. So again, even if it's not trying to come at us and say, stop calling us that, it changes nothing. It does nothing. It does nothing to convince us. What would convince us is your evidence. So she goes on to basically, I will read this again, because this is actually more of the drama and the persecution kind of playing out. So here's what she says. I've been doing this podcast for over 1.5 years, and while I've had a lot of people very mad at me, mainly Mormons who like polygamy, I have never had anything like the barrage of awful comments that have come from ex and post Mormons. They have no idea who I am, what my story is, what the purpose of my podcast was and is, the efforts I have made to try to help bridge divides by, among other things, helping the more conservative LDS portion of my audience become more understanding of the struggles of LGBT people in our church, or navigate faith divisions within families, or understand and empathize with people who, for very good reasons, leave the church, or anything else. They just watched RFM's episode, assumed it was fair, and that I'm an idiot worthy of abuse, and let it rip. Is that really what you think is a worthy outcome? A couple things to address here. Okay. First of all, like, I agree, it's not good to be mean or malicious. So I would like to. I think she should understand. First of all, this is happening on both sides. So it's not that her commenters are little angels, and vice versa. So our audience is our audience. We can put out a plea to not be overtly malicious, but at the end of the day, like, that's not something really in our control. And based on, like, the behavior they've shown here, anyway, I have not seen a way to disagree with them that they don't take as malicious and hurtful. This is also another point of conspiratorial thinking, is that it is very identity based. And so part of, I think, the problem of the breakdown of this and reason why they kind of keep bringing up this conspiracy thing is because to disagree, it's because it's so tied up in identity, to disagree with the premise is to basically, it's a personal attack. There's not a way, they're not able to differentiate between their argument and themselves. And so attacks on the argument are interpreted as attacks on themselves. So that is happening here. Again, I don't think there's really much that our commenters can say that Michelle won't find malicious, no matter how mild. But again, you just follow your own conscience. Try to be kind. Okay, and then next thing, I do want to say, like, Michelle appears at multiple points to be extremely sensitive to criticism, and I have some empathy for that. I feel bad for that. There's a way to handle constructive criticism, which is, deserved criticism and things that can help you along. But then, especially out in the podcast world, the space that we occupy on YouTube, there's also a lot of undeserved criticism, and that's what the trash can is for. And Michelle, I feel bad for her that she doesn't have this ability yet to not take personally criticism. Again, it's undeserved, especially if she does interpret it to be deliberately insulting. And as someone who's been there, I understand. I totally get it. But also, as someone who has moved well beyond that, I hope that someday Michelle is able to find her way on this side of the river, because it is way more fun to get undeserved criticism, because it's freaking hilarious. Okay, it becomes a joke. I snapshot so many stupid and awful comments that have been made about me because they're funny to me now. They don't hurt my feelings at all, and I have a little collection that just, when I'm looking for a laugh, I come back to. So just for an example, again, the podcast formerly known as Midnight Mormons once accused Bill of being a furry, right? And so Bill's response was to find a picture of a man in a dog costume off the internet, and he made his profile picture this dog costume face, right? And so for people who knew where it came from, most people found it funny, but I actually got a Facebook message from someone that didn't know about the accusation, just saw the picture, and they had sent it to me and with the question that, is Bill okay? So yeah, Bill had that up for a couple days. It's funny. And another example is Jacob Hansen did a hit piece on ex-Mormon podcasters, which, he said, the problems with ex-Mormon icons or whatever, right? So RFM is on it, his picture is on it, he's one of the ones listed. He puts the link to that podcast up on his Facebook page, and he captions it, "Hey everybody, I'm an icon." And you see, this is the kind of fun that you can have when you don't let insults ruin your day like this. Like, if it's, it just, I hope Michelle gets there someday, because she really is incredibly pained multiple times throughout these exchanges, and it does seem that it has caused, by the end of this, it affects her. It affects her life. So it's not just merely like being sensitive. It affects mental health. If you're not able to handle criticism and then all of a sudden you're getting a lot of it, it can be really damaging. And I think Michelle has gone through that, as part of this. So yeah, I feel bad for her that engaging in this way is something that just brings her more criticism than she is equipped to handle at this point. So I do want to address some other points. She does make a good point that if this is to our audience, okay, if all you've seen of Michelle is just her interactions here, you have not seen the best of Michelle. And so, yeah, it is really kind of a one-dimensional portrait that you may be getting, and it's not a very flattering one. But I do want to just point out, I've only just dipped into a few of her other podcasts, so I haven't really watched a lot, but I've seen enough to I guess agree. I have my own testimony of the things she brings up here. When she talks about LGBT issues in the church, she is an ally as far as members of the church can be. Again, there's always limits here, but she is. Okay, this is a divide that she works towards, has strong empathetic feelings for, right? And then also faith divisions within families. Michelle is one of the few people, there's a lot of people who are, in the church who are unable to understand people who leave the church, all right? The programming is just so strong that, we're, lazy learners, we wanted to sin, never had a testimony in the first place, da-da-da-da-da. Michelle is one of the few people who still has a testimony, who has trodden that path a lot further than other people have. She has had her own faith struggles, while she didn't, end up on the same path that we have here. I'm saying that she is somebody that does understand them more truly and more deeply than the typical Mormon does. So again, we don't see that here because we're so much wrapped up into this like villains and victims kind of thing. She does kind of paint us as apostates the way regular members do. But again, that's really situational. Michelle is capable of seeing more nuance to it. So I think what she's saying here is somewhat accurate, right? So faith divisions, especially within families, this is something that she's sensitive to, and cares about and wants to bridge. And then, so I guess I just want to, put that out there. So we disagree with Michelle's conclusions. Like, I definitely feel that she's misguided, but like the feeling behind this is one of care and concern. It's one of, it's an abhorrence for polygamy, which we all share, right? We all acknowledge that it's a bad thing. So I feel like morally, together, both sides have the higher ground here than, Mormons currently who believe it is a doctrine, believe it was a commandment of God, etc., and who justify it. I think, yeah, that is something that does kind of get lost in the sauce here because of the divide. So, moving on, is it possible to have a discussion where we both simply try to actually understand one another without having to prove the other side wrong, or even worse, use any tactics necessary to make people think they are idiots? Is the goal a discussion or a debate? Again, this is a lot of hypocrisy. I don't think Michelle and Jeremy and Whitney are trying to use any tactic necessary to make us look like idiots, but they will seem to use any tactic necessary to make us look like complete villains. So, let's keep going. By discussion, I mean the ability to say, yeah, that's a good point. I see where you are coming from. I still find this evidence more compelling, but I can see why someone would see it your way. Again, this is something they're asking for from us, which we have done, but they have not done for us. Continuing on, is that something you guys can do or have any interest in? Or are you simply wanting to try to do whatever you can to make us look stupid? Don't get me wrong, I'm very confident in my ability to engage with reason, logic, evidence, and information. That's not the problem. I just have little interest in coming on to be insulted, cut off, ignored, and intentionally misunderstood. If we want a conversation, I say great. If we want a debate, which is far less appealing because it does not create understanding and unity, which is possible even in disagreement, then we should get a neutral space, some excellent moderators, and acknowledge that's what we are doing. So again, this is something that they're going to repeat often. Jeremy's going to say this again later too. They insist like we can engage with reason and logic and evidence. We have this. We have reason. We have information. But why won't you bring it then? We have asked so many times, politely, and this was the agreement from the beginning, again, from that very first email, the exchange of said evidence and arguments and logic and reasoning, and every chance they get, they deflect, they don't provide it, they want to play out this persecution drama instead, over and over and over again. If you are confident in your ability to engage with reason, bring it. Please bring it. Please stop with this stuff. Bill Reel answers July 1st, 7:35 a.m. He says, again, Bill takes this so kindly. He completely ignores all the patronizing, like, can you guys have a conversation? Are you capable of it? Are you capable of it? When, again, like, we have been trying to have the conversation the whole time, and they're the ones that have been stalling it the whole time. Bill ignores that and just keeps it polite, and he keeps going. He says, I hear you. Both sides are adamant that they are right. Both sides see their evidence as clearly superior. Both sides perceive flaws in the other side's evidence. Both sides feel the other side is dismissing their points. Both sides feel the other is avoiding confronting things. Typing out a disagreement literally takes 10 times longer than talking. And as long as we do this in writing, we will be talking past each other. I want a face-to-face because I think it is the best chance to avoid talking past each other. I would love a multi-hour sit-down, any chance to talk in a way that can test premises on both sides. Now, I interjected the kind of the dripping sarcasm in the talking as I was reading that. But Bill's, again, making a good point. Typing these out is taking 10 times longer than just talking and having a conversation. So again, this is yet another request for a conversation for the purpose of understanding each other, that they will continue to deny and refuse to do. And this is the first time I think Bill kind of like brings up a multi-hour sit down and a chance to talk. And I think it's the reason why it really does have to grow into a multi-hour thing at this point, because the misunderstandings are growing and growing and growing. So yeah, I think minimum a multi-hour sit down, again, talking, and by talking, like verbal, in real time, via Zoom or StreamYard or whatever, these things can be hashed out so much quicker. And I'm going to point out again, I'm going to really sound like a broken record, but I have to, because they are a broken record. This, again, the format is something they agreed to from the very beginning, and but now they continuously like push back on that or go back on that whilst like somehow basically blaming us for it. It's astounding. So email number 25 is from Michelle, July 1st, 9:36 a.m. She says, I have been wondering why you want to have a discussion before the discussion. I'm pausing here again. The confusion is just astounding here. Clearly she sees that things are not going well. Right? Surely she sees all of these misunderstandings happening. I mean, she's addressing them for one. She's making these accusations. You're misunderstanding, you're misrepresenting, da-da-da-da-da. Literally in the previous email, Bill specifically points out, not for the first time, that it takes so much longer to be typing things out and doing this in written form than it would if we could just talk. This is the email she's responding to where he points that out. And her very first thing is, I've been wondering why you want to have a discussion before the discussion. Like, he just said. I don't. This is why this email chain was so frustrating, even just to look at it on the periphery. Because anytime a step towards progress seems to be made, it just immediately goes backwards. Like, on one hand, it seems like we agree, it seems like we understand, we're going to have a pre-podcast discussion planning meeting so we can streamline the real thing and not have it be a mess, and now there's all this confusion. And even though the Bill will say why he wants to do it. They'll just keep coming back and say, okay, but why do you want to do it? And then Bill will say, well, this is why we want to do it. And then they'll come back and be like, but why do you want to do it? It's like, it's insane. It's insane. So moving on, continuing Michelle's email. She says, generally in podcasting, you don't want to have the discussion before the discussion. So I'm not clear on why you want to have a long discussion before a scheduled podcast. I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but I have to admit, after several of the things that appear to have happened from the very first reaching out to one of us before your first episode on this topic, there is not a lot of trust that everyone is acting in good faith. I think it would be helpful if you could really clarify why you want to have a private conversation when we already have a scheduled public conversation, especially knowing that this is very likely to lower the quality of the actual recorded podcast. Wow, there's so much wrong here. First of all, generally in podcasting, you don't want to have the discussion before the discussion. No. I've been on multiple podcasts, like as a presenter, on Mormonism Live, on Mormon Stories, I'm going to be on Mormonish, but on Steve Pineker's Mormon Book Reviews. I was on Priesthood Dispatches. Every podcast that I've been a guest on where I'm presenting something has had pre-planning meetings. Now, for some of the more relaxed ones where we're just swapping stories, it's just been a quick like, hey, this is we had a conversation. These are the stories I'm going to share. These are some things that we can talk about and swap back and forth. For Steve Pineker's book review, I was reviewing a book, The Fate of the Persecutors of Joseph Smith, and a lot of work was put into that. And so, yeah, we absolutely had a discussion before that to outline the show and what we were doing. So, hi, post-editing Maven here. While I was going through this, I actually was listening, speaking of Mormon book reviews, I was listening to Steve Pineker interview Dan Vogel about charisma under pressure, and he mentioned precisely this thing. He calls it an intake interview, which is another good word for the thing that we were trying to do with Michelle and co. So I'm just going to put that in here real quick.
I remember it was a Saturday morning and you and I were having like an intake interview, which lasted like 3 hours long. And I remember talking with you and I was like, dude, this is the interview.
It's amazing to me that Michelle will just make this broad sweeping brush, like for all podcasting, that you don't have a discussion before the discussion, when that's just simply not true. It's astounding. And then again, she's more confused. I'm not clear why you want to have this happen. I'm not opposed to it, but and then again, it would be helpful if you could really clarify why you want to have a private conversation. And I just don't know. I don't know what she wants. Bill has said multiple times. He has explained this. He has clarified exactly this. And again, this was something brought up in the very beginning that she agreed to. So this pushback is just really maddening. So anyway, she sends the next email in the afternoon, 4:31 p.m. She asks, how would you like to proceed? Is there a reason you want to have a secret/private conversation instead of either just coming on my show or having us come on yours? If we're going to do it, let's just schedule it and do it. This is the first time they kind of bring up this like secret, private conversation kind of a thing. And again, it's just injecting more suspicion into something that should be not a big deal at all. And I actually, let's go back to the previous email. Okay, keep this, I guess, in your hats a little bit later, because I remember reading this and not being sure what she was talking about. I wondered, like, ooh, is she talking about me? I'm not really sure. It was pretty vague, so I just left it. I don't think I interjected. Anyway, I'm just going to read this part again. She says, I have to admit, after several of the things that appear to have happened from the very first reaching out to one of us before your first episode on this topic. So before Mormonism Live 131 on Joseph, the evidence for Joseph having polygamy, one of us reached out to one of them pretty early on. And I know I did. I reached out to Whitney. But of course, at this point, I don't actually know if I'm the first one to have reached out. As for all I know, Bill and RFM could have started reaching out. I mean, again, this is, Bill put out the or the accepted the challenge, I guess, to take on evidence of Joseph's polygamy after Mormonism Live, episode 130. So yeah, so it was shortly after that I reached out. I assumed that Bill and RFM could also have in their preparation for the research and stuff. So yeah, so this was an interesting point for me, because I was like, ooh, I don't know. And then again, the insinuation here that, like, if she is talking about me, right, the very first reaching out before the first episode, she says there's not a lot of trust that everyone is acting in good faith. And I just, again, this is why I wasn't sure, like, if this is, I did know that I reached out to Whitney, but I didn't know if this was actually in reference to me specifically, because I didn't see anything in bad faith as to what I did. And I'll get into it later, but just for right now, like, to set the stage, initially part of the plan for the episode was for me to look into basically the women's specific testimonies who claim to be wives of Joseph Smith, and why they're disregarded. So I reached out to Whitney to make sure I understood the argument correctly, because I haven't delved into this as deeply, and then the podcast was set to happen like a week away, so that's not enough time with my full-time job to listen to 70 episodes of 132 problems or read an entire book. So I thought I was doing a good thing, acting in good faith, to reach out to Whitney and just at least make sure that I understood the basics of the argument, and to ask for correction. Again, most people would see that as an act in good faith. So again, that's why when I read this, I was just like, are they talking about, but how could they be? I genuinely couldn't see how it could be about me. So, I didn't really respond to this directly. And that's going to come back up later. So, okay. So at this point, I do finally step in. Here is my first email. I say, okay, like, I'm trying to explain what we're going for, right? Because she's asking for why do you want this secret, private conversation? Okay. And I am also really frustrated at this email exchange because it's just taking forever. So I did it in a video. It was really late at night here, got greasy hair and dark circles under my eyes, but I go through and I try to explain in my words, in case it might help, again, for, I don't know, the 10th time now, maybe by the time in this email chain, what the purpose is and the benefits of a planning conversation for the podcast before the actual podcast. Which, again, I feel like due to the sheer number of misunderstandings and accusations from Michelle and Whitney and Jeremy directly, that we're misunderstanding, we're misrepresenting, I feel like surely it should be obvious to them, and they should be very motivated to want to have this conversation to fix those very issues that they are bringing up and projecting onto this. So it's just it's just baffling that they are so adamantly against a planning meeting beforehand, and that they continuously ask why we want to, and we can, in despite of us continuously answering that question. So I'm not going to play that video that I made. I made a new one where I basically just, I don't like how I looked in that one. So I made it audio only. I will link to it. So if you want to listen to it, it's about half an hour of everything that I said to Michelle. Again, just in full transparency, okay, you can know what I said. I will do the quick summary, because some of the things I said in that video are going to come into play in later emails. So, again, first, I explained the purpose and the benefits of a pre-podcast conversation, okay? I spent a lot of time on that, trying to explain that to her. And then I basically accused her of refusing to provide evidence and wrapping up the conflict. It's basically the language I've said now. Like, I feel like I did it, somewhat gently, but also like firmly, bluntly, but again, not too mean. But I'm just pointing out the facts like as I see them. And that's one of them that I'm interpreting from this. Third thing, I accuse them of deliberately sabotaging the conversation so that they can back out and still pretend to be on the high road. This was a mistake. I think it was in my brain at the time. I probably should have left it there, because it does kind of end up poisoning the well and kind of locking us into maybe the conflict lasting longer than it necessarily needed to. I'll go into that more in a little bit. So fourth thing I do is I point out ways that we have treated them in good faith, like they keep saying, wanting and demanding us and saying that we're not doing. I point out to them the ways that we have done that, because clearly this is a blind spot for them and they're not able to see when we do that. And then, let's see, point number 5 now. I try to acknowledge their pain points and feelings of dismissal and ridicule, right? So I do try to address that. And I used examples like from Michelle's video where she basically spends like the first half hour of that video poisoning the well against critics. I think that is a very accurate representation of the whole first section of her video, and I'll link to that as well. You can watch that and tell me if you agree or not. She's going to address that in her follow-up email. So, and then I ask for them to treat us with the good faith that they're demanding moving forward, and instead of seeing the malicious intent behind everything. So basically, I'm asking them to, put their money where their mouth is and do the same thing. And then the last thing is I reiterate one more time the purpose to meeting virtually, to having a conversation, to work things out beforehand, rather than the inferiority of the email exchange, because this is email 27 now. Okay, this is getting long, and you guys were not even halfway done. So, yeah, that's my summary of my video. I will link to it. You can listen to it later. So, Bill also comes in at this point, and he also answers the question again. Okay, July 1st, 5:37 p.m. He says, not secret or private. Remember, that's their words. They're just really interjecting this. He says, rather, I think an extended conversation over multiple hours will be required to sort out what each side believes generally and how they appropriate weight to the evidence, and to have a space to talk out any questions asked to get clarity. I don't want people to feel time constraints, and I want this to go as long as productive. I thought that maybe that would be best done with one rep from each side, and then when we do a show, with all 6 of us, we can get right into the nuts and bolts of it as the groundwork would have been established. So again, we explain why we want the planning episode, which again, one would think would be clearly obvious the way things are going, why that would be beneficial. All right, after all that, the next email is from Michelle, July 1st, 7:04 p.m. She says, thanks for your video, Maven, and your response, Bill. A lot to respond to here. It is interesting to hear Maven voice the concerns about me wanting to back out and claim the high road, because that has been my exact concern on the other end. Either that or some sort of secret recording that could be edited, etc. We have definitely been dealing with a lack of trust on our end. It probably started with Maven reaching out to Whitney in advance of your first show. A lot of that felt very fishy, not the least of which was the request to schedule a phone call for Wednesday evening, which was when your show aired live. I would love to know that we are all reading too much into that, but I hope you can understand that it raised some red flags. Hi, it's me. I'm the problem. And the implication, so they do spell it out here, but again, I am not conspiratorial minded. Not to the level that they are. So even though they basically kind of put it out here, like secret recording being edited, like, while the show was live, it was so nonsensical to me. They spell it out right here, but I honestly couldn't wrap my head around it, because why? Like, why would we do that? Why? We've never done anything like that. We had a great show that was full of like documents and evidence and stuff. So like this kind of implication that maybe I was trying to call Whitney on the show live, like it just didn't make any sense at all. How would that have made the episode better? Like what would it, especially like, I don't know. It just seemed like a stupid idea, because again, the point of a good show is preparation and evidence and planning beforehand. So to think that there's any value in calling up someone randomly who's not knowing maybe what questions you're going to ask, etc., it just wouldn't be good. it wouldn't be good. So yeah, so they clearly lay it out here, but I'm not able to actually understand it and really accept that that's really what they mean. I again, because this is actually a sign of like more good faith from me. It's so nonsensical and it's so conspiratorial, and it paints me in such a malicious light here. Even though she's really explicitly putting out an accusation, I'm not at the point that I can genuinely believe that they genuinely think that. So I take it to mean I must be misunderstanding. I can't be understanding this correctly, because it's just such a bad take that I bring this on me. I'm not putting it on them as maliciously lying about me or spreading rumors or trying to do all this. I just think I am really misunderstanding what's going on here. That's what happens. But I do think it is kind of interesting to me, because again, I reached out to Whitney in good faith just to make sure I understood what's your position on the women. Is it basically that they all lie, period, just all of them, just because, or is there more nuance than that? That was in good faith. So here's some more text. So this is a text from me to RFM and Bill. It seems from the most recent message that conspiracy is a major triggering word, even though the same message showed continued determination to be conspiratorial minded. Apparently the fact that I reached out to Whitney before the last show to try to understand better was quote unquote fishy. I'm kind of dismissive of it at this point. Yeah. Here's the rest of it. Okay. So she goes on to say, again, a repeat of previous stuff that we've moved on from, or wish we could move on from. She says, I would like to see this conversation happen. So do we, Michelle. We really, really would like a conversation to happen. She says, I too think it would be useful for the audience. See, so we're back. We're back. We got her back. She's back on board. We've got agreement. She understands now, right? Right? She would like this conversation to happen, this pre-conversation, yes? She thinks it would be useful for the audience, yes? You understand now? You understand why this would make the final product a better version? Great. Let's keep going. She says, another thing that has caused concern has been the interactions on Facebook. No, we're back to the interaction on Facebook. Bill, my perception has been that you have refused to answer my questions or respond to the things I have laid out, either here or on Facebook comments. Just like interjection here, she has not laid them out here in the email chain. Maybe she has in Facebook comments. She definitely has not put them here in the email chain. We have asked multiple times for it. Let's keep going. She says, after the Facebook interactions, I started to lose hope that you were acting in good faith. I disagree. It's very clear that from the get-go, there has been suspicion and this assumption that we've been acting in bad faith this whole entire time. So I am not buying this at all, 100%, that this is the point where Michelle is losing hope that we were acting in good faith. She never had that to begin with. I don't think any of them did. So, not truly. She says, I will respond to one point of why we feel that ad hominems are being used. Again, this does not move the conversation forward. We're not the one halting it. These guys are the ones halting it by being upset that we have an opinion and we feel like it's legitimate. So we're not going to change it, okay, without seeing evidence to do that, which again would be a change in their behavior. So it's just so frustrating that every time it seems like we're making a step forward, okay, we agree, right? She understands why a conversation beforehand would be a good thing. She understands why it would be useful for the audience, why it would be good for the show. But now let's get back into the mud, back into the drama, back into why like we're upset at this opinion that you have, okay? It's just so frustrating. So both Bill and RFM based their entire videos on the trope of conspiracy theorists. They did not. That is not an accurate representation. It is a point that has been brought up a lot, but they both focus a lot on evidence. They look into the actual evidence and the actual rebuttals. That is the primary focus of all of the episodes. But yet, is there an underlying belief that the responses we're getting are coming from conspiratorial thinking? Yes, because that is demonstrated. So no, that is not the entire video that they're putting out is not on the trope of conspiracy theorists. You can say that maybe about this, and I can go much more into this. I absolutely can, and maybe will double down on this conspiracy thing. This is the behavior that they are displaying. So let's go back to the email. She says it's not a reasoned response, it's ad hominem. I'm sure that is your perception, which is fine. So, again, this is just, as I've said before, constant contradictions and double standards that just, it's back and forth and back and forth and back and forth unnecessarily. So we're mad that you're using ad hominem. It's not reason. It's destroying the conversation. I'm sure that is your perception, which is fine. Like, well, what is it? Is it fine that that's our perception? Because if so, I think you would ignore it. You would move on. You would just say, I don't think we're conspiracy theorists because we have evidence and data and can back it up. And here it is. Here it is. We're bringing it to the table. That's the actions or behavior I would expect to follow someone who really does believe, okay, if that's your perception and that's genuine, that's fine, I understand, right? So these are empty words to me because the behavior before and after this email is clearly going to show that it's clearly not fine to them. They're upset about it. So why even put that in here? You know, why say it's fine? You know, like literally right after being like, that's not reason, you're being mean. You guys are all big meanie faces. So, continuing on. It didn't hurt our feelings. But it is an ad hominem that doesn't lead to productive conversation. Maven, most of what you pulled out from the beginning of my video was my attempt, which clearly didn't land, to explain that when people just call names or attribute motives, it shuts down conversation. This is, again, another like contradictory and super ironic statement. Watch that first half hour of that episode, guys, and tell me, do you think that she really did explain that when people just call names or attribute motives, it shuts down conversation? But that's not like exactly what she did. She attributed motives. She called out names. She absolutely poisoned the well, made everyone out to be like big and mean. There was the total victim. Like I don't want to put myself out there. I'm scared. I'm sticking my neck out. You know, just all this. It was a massive preamble to actually responding to our videos to poison the well first. So it's astonishing to me that she's basically saying my point was the opposite. Wow, it's just. Moving on. She says, I won't talk about pain points, but I have engaged. This is more of the same. More poisoning of the well. You guys are big meanie heads, right? This is how I'm seeing this. She says, I've engaged enough with ex-Mormons who view me as a conspiracy theorist on topics other than this, COVID, for example, to have some idea what I was in for. I know Mormons can be difficult, but honestly, the way I have repeatedly been treated by family members, friends, and online by people in the post-Mormon community has put my interactions with Mormons to shame. I appreciated that both Bill and RFM weren't mean-spirited in their videos, so thank you for that. I am well aware it could have been a lot worse. Pause again. More contradictions in the same paragraph, the same email, right? The same email, just literally right before. She's like, it's ad hominem. Your entire videos were tropes on conspiracy theorists. And then just in the very next paragraph, she says, I appreciate that both Bill and RFM weren't mean-spirited in their videos. So thank you for that. It's a contradiction, but I'm going to also give Michelle some credit here because this is the first and only time that a good faith acknowledgement is made here, I think. If you are aware of others, let me know. Put them in the comments. But again, and I base this one acknowledgement here, to me, honestly, isn't enough to overcome the mountain of evidence, again, before this email and also that's going to come after this email. I can't I can't really take this as sincere compared to the rest of the things that she says, overwhelmingly to the contrary of this, but I have to acknowledge it. It's there. There exists an appreciation, and, even though she's going to totally walk back later on it and paint it very differently in her video, that's coming up as she's going to do, she at least did it one time here. So, okay, let's keep going. She says, a lot of followers are not as reserved in their responses. The comments and messages I have been getting, and few from real-life past friends, have been a lot to take. I did feel immense fear stepping out and making that video and thus signing up for all of this, but I have developed a pretty thick skin, and I'm perfectly willing to engage if it can be productive. No, that's not what's happening here. That has not been what's happening here. It's just, again, just a real amazing lack of self-awareness. Or maybe just different definitions. Maybe what to Michelle is thick skin is what looks to me like extremely thin skin. And I guess to be fair to her, and maybe put this in the best light, I'm certain Michelle has grown in this area, okay? And perhaps I think she maybe can think that she has made some progress in this. I think she has been through a lot. You do learn to kind of grow and take from this criticism. But again, I think this is something that at least I personally am miles ahead of Michelle in being able to do. So I don't know if she can even actually comprehend what it's like to be like where Bill and RFM and I are on this scale of being able to take criticism and really truly understanding what it means to have thick skin. But I can say I think she has recognized progress in herself, and maybe she thinks that she's gotten to this point of thick skin. But I think clearly evidenced in these emails, and the fact that they keep bringing up ad hominem over and over and over and over again, it shows, I think, is evidence of actually very thin skin. And when she says, I'm perfectly willing to engage, that's not what's happening here. Engagement to me would look like bringing the evidence and actually having the conversation that we agreed to at the beginning of the email chain rather than this drama conversation. So, all right. Email number 30 from Michelle, July 1st, 7:12 p.m. She says, I didn't make a video, so I'm concerned that some of this might come across as upset or intense. Yeah, you could say that. Please don't read anything that way. Okay. Okay. None of that, nothing so far has been upset or intense. It just really looks like it. But she says it's not, so, she hasn't learned the winky face from Whitney. You put a winky face in, that makes everything all better. That makes everything kind-hearted all of a sudden. I don't know. Please read everything with a good vibe and a desire to bridge the divides, build trust, and move forward with good feeling. It's amazing to me that someone can do so much work to do the opposite and then send an email like this and say, please read everything with a good vibe and a desire to build trust and move forward with good feeling. When, that is anything but, I think, what any reasonable person can infer from the email exchange just thus far. This cannot erase or change everything that has happened previously. And it's astounding to me that it would even be put into words. She goes further. She says, nothing was meant as a criticism or sour grapes. Just an attempt to explain where we've been coming from in the hope that perceptions can improve. The only thing that would improve our perception would be the evidence, okay? The dialogue that we agreed to. Nothing they have done so far in these emails have done anything to warrant an improvement of perception. It's the complete opposite. Everything they've been doing here is just continually, it is ruining the progress that we're trying to make. So she says, I'd love to see us be able to do this, and if possible, and considering one another friends. Now that's cool. As much as I get upset, at the I just don't even know what to call it. Like, is it just ignorance and a lack of self-awareness, or is it really genuine? Like, does she really genuinely think that everything she said has been in a good vibe? Because if that's good vibe and not criticism, boy, I really wonder what her bad vibe looks like and what criticism looks like. It's this is like a, you know, with friends like these, who needs enemies? Like, what does it look like to Michelle if she thinks she's, you know, coming in good faith and desire to build bridges and stuff? What does that look like for her when she's not? I can't even comprehend. But again, I do think it's cool, whatever level of sincerity, you know, there's at least some for her to put it in here to end up considering one another friends. All right. And I just want to point out that, like, it already has been pointed out, again, from the beginning, and it has also been reiterated, like in RFM's episode, and I think in Bill's too, that the friendship is not, it's not a problem on our side, on our end here. I literally, like, one of the first texts I was showing was one from RFM saying that Denver Snuffer invited him, you know, to go out to dinner when he comes to Utah. Denver Snuffer is somebody who is, you know, takes this route. He's also friends with Rock Waterman, who also is a strong advocate for polygamy not originating with Joseph. And so RFM already has friendships with people, you know, on this side of things. So the maliciousness is entirely a product of the minds of Michelle and Whitney and Jeremy here. And it's just so sad to me that I think they do want to be friends, genuinely. I do think that. And I'm just sad that they're unable to see how their own thinking and their own behavior is the primary source of poison in the ability for that to happen, that their own actions, that their own thoughts are the ones that are ruining this. And I can prove that in the very next sentence, okay? Let me just recap. She says, I would love to see us be able to do this, and if possible, end considering one another friends. And then in parentheses, she says, LOL. As I type that, I immediately feel that your response might be a sneer, and the thought that that would never happen. So if I'm wrong about that, I guess it shows my perception that hopefully you can help me work through. And if I'm right, perhaps it shows why there have been concerns. The LOL doesn't fix things here, nor would a winky face. I found this statement after the one as friends, you know, hoping to be friends, to be incredibly sad. And I admit that there were plenty of times I'm going back and forth in this email exchange, having hope that it'll happen, and then, you know, it's just one step forward, two steps back, kind of back and forth. This line here was, I think, the first really, really big hit to my hope that something could come from this, because it just comes across as impossible. Like, it's impossible, right? Do people watching this understand why I would think that? Because she says, as I type that, I immediately feel that your response might be a sneer. So if I'm wrong about that, I guess it shows my perception that hopefully you can help me work through. And no, we can't. I am more confident, like at this point, and even more so now, like at this point, that sitting where I am today, that we can't help you work through this perception, Michelle, because it's one of your own making, and it's one of your own, like, desire to hold on to. There's really quite literally nothing we can do to change this perception. And again, I think it's because it's baked into the conspiratorial thinking, this victims versus villains, us versus them, black and white, we're the heroes, we're the good guys, we're the ones that care about honesty, we're the ones acting in good faith, we're the ones that are never strawmanning the other side, but, you know, these other people are just setting traps, looking for gotchas, trying to set up secret recordings or secret live air, like Mean Girls style three-way calling traps. Like, this is all conspiracy thinking, and it's all coming from you guys. let's keep going. She says, thanks again for the responses. I hope we can have productive conversations, ideally with mutual respect and goodwill. Yeah, the mutual part is what's difficult here, and it's not from our side. So at this point, RFM has been kind of having some fun looking at comments and stuff. Again, he's not paying attention to these email chains, but he is, just kind of looking at what the general responses have been to, our initial podcast, Michelle's response, his response to her. So Radio Free Mormon puts out episode 287, The Boy Who Kicked Conspiracy Theories. So, yeah, again, there's that C word that they hate so much, but again, it's accurate. It fits. And this is, again, a legitimate belief of RFM's. It's not one in maliciousness or just to tear somebody down. He genuinely feels this is the category that your argument falls under, and obviously I agree. So, of course, the metaphor in the title is kicking a hornet's nest. I think it's pretty accurate considering the response so far, but it's almost more prophetic considering the effect that this particular podcast has. Really does kick the hornet's nest, and things really start to go downhill from here. So this episode is primarily RFM summarizing comments, good and bad, like from both camps, back and forth, and just a little commentary. It's just a lighthearted one, but there's a pretty major mistake made in here. So as I was listening to it, all right, he makes the accusation in the beginning that he accuses their side of wanting to have, quote unquote secret meetings, and he says that they have backed out, and basically just goes full on and calls them cowards for it, right? Saying that they're not able to really present their defense, which is true because they have not done that. And the secret meetings, it's not that they were wanting a secret meeting. Secret meeting has been their wording for the reasonable planning meeting that Bill has been asking for this entire time. But anyway, RFM gets things a little bit mixed up. So I hear that. Okay, I'm listening to the podcast pretty shortly after, and so again, real quick, this is July 1st, okay? This is Saturday, it's the July 4th, holiday weekend. RFM was recording in the studio. It puts this out somewhere around 7 p.m.-ish or something like that, and it basically, as soon as he uploads it, he goes out with friends to dinner, to have fun, okay? So he posts it, he's out of the studio. I'm listening to it. And we're like 5 or 10 minutes, as soon as that comes in, and he says that they've, that they're not coming on, that they've backed out. I have this huge record scratch, like, wait a minute moment, right? Now, I am aware that more could be going on, especially with the Facebook stuff that I know I'm not in and I'm not paying attention to, that there could be something, I could be the one that's behind the ball here, but at my current knowledge, I'm not, and RFM has got it wrong. So I immediately reach out. Okay, here's my text message to RFM. I tried calling, he didn't answer, right? So then I sent him this text. Must call, I think you've misrepresented both sides right out of the gate. And it's important to me, okay? As much as they paint us as having just no integrity whatsoever, I think Bill and RFM consistently put out as best they can with integrity, good product, good resources, sources, citations, etc. It matters, and this is a key, I think, point or sticking point to us on this side of things is the ability to have integrity. Like, this is our beef with the church, that there's no integrity in the first place, that no apologies are ever made, no acknowledgement of mistakes are ever made, no reparations, no trying to fix anything, just constant doubling down, right? So obviously, like, we care about that, and I care. I don't want us to be wrong, and I know it's going to cause problems, so I'm immediately trying to fix it. And so here's some texts. I'm not going to read all of them, so you might, again, have to come to and pause the video if you want to see all of it. So these are from me. I'd say RFM, they're the ones that are just wanting to come on the show live. I think you haven't read any of the latest exchanges. That turned out to be true. I said it's Bill and I thought you too, that are trying to get this hashed out in the background first. I think your podcast will really hurt our side by completely flipping the script and calling them cowards for not wanting to do what they are actually trying to do. And this confuses RFM because, again, as much as we're painted as like being deliberately malicious. This again, it's part of the conspiratorial thinking that that's how you have to see everything. That the idea that humans are humans and make human mistakes it can't be part of the equation when you are a conspiratorial thinker. Everything's deliberate. So anyway, this is RFM's response. He says, I talked to Bill this morning on the phone before I started recording, and he was very clear to me that they were the ones wanting to do it in writing back and forth, that part's true, and not come on the show live, that part is not. So he pushes back. He says, I'm pretty sure that I've got this right. I will always admit the possibility I could be wrong, but I know that's what we talked about this morning, me and Bill. Okay, fair enough. I'm still pretty sure, so I kind of push back on that. So he tries calling Bill again, who is also not answering his phone at this because he's also with family. They came in from out of town. It's a holiday weekend. So Bill and RFM are both now out on the town being social and, living life. So I say, okay, well, like my response, my whole video was basically entirely about the reason why Bill is trying to get all the points hashed out ahead of time. Can you pull the episode until we can work this out? Bill joins the chat. All right, he says, Michelle wanted to correspond via writing, again, true, and was telling me she was having second thoughts about coming on and wanted me to address all of her concerns via comments in posts. And then he's asking which episode to pull, so I say the one RFM just put out, can we pull that one? I check with Bill, I say, you want to get the main points hashed out beforehand, yes, right? This is the whole point. RFM, he jumps in to say, like, Bill, I left you a message to kind of get you up to speed on what's happening here, right? So I come in again, I say, look, I know I don't make the decisions here, but I feel very strongly that there's value to pulling it ASAP so that we can regroup, because I absolutely see this flipped 180 degrees, and I'm certain Michelle and company have the same understanding that I do. I'm positive, this is all caps, positive, this will make our side look very, again in caps, bad, and align exactly with their narrative. And then my next text says, please, please. I say this is all like before RFM released his episode. So Bill says, I'm happy to pull it. The trouble is I'm not at a computer. And my text crossed over. I'm begging. I say, I'm begging you both to pull the episode so we can discuss it. So RFM is asking, like, Maven, can you pull it? And Bill's agreeing, yes, absolutely, we can pull it. So I don't have access, Bill and RFM do, but neither of them are at a computer. So it's kind of funny. There's Maven just kind of freaking out, like, oh no. Big mistake, we need to fix it. And Bill and RFM are, with family, with friends, like they're out to dinner and they're the ones who could do it, but again, they're not in front of their computers. So anyway, Bill says, I'll try to do it from my phone. RFM sends the rolling on the floor laughing emoji and says, I'm not at a computer either. So they're kind of saying there's some humor in this, just like, boy, what a situation we find ourselves in. RFM also says, I have limited access by the phone, then just get ... RFM's waiting for updates, I guess. Bill says, I don't know what's happening. RFM, are you in favor of that too, right? Like pulling the episode? And RFM says yes. So we finally agree, like pull the episode. I'm asking if Bill can tell me how, while thinking I don't have access. And then the last text I'm going to read here from me, it says, I really think we've just nuked our credibility. And then RFM says, it's not my fault, I don't know what Bill is negotiating. And then Bill says, okay, I think it's done, but it will take time to depopulate. So, and I knew that. When you pull a podcast episode, a lot of people's devices are set to download if they're subscribed. Episodes will download immediately, and they won't be pulled until the app refreshes or resyncs. So I did know, like, it's already out there. There's definitely going to be people listening to it. But again, like, when you make a mistake, you do your best to correct it. So it was put out there. Definitely people were going to hear it and get the wrong idea, but like we're trying to fix it. And it's going to become clear, I think, or at least I hope. I point it out now just in case it doesn't, that even at this point, the misunderstanding is still only slightly corrected. So despite our attempts to make sure we're understanding the situation, Bill and RFM still don't quite get it all the way correct. some of the continuing misunderstandings aren't cleared up until much, much later. Bill says it's, no biggie. Like, emails came out that should have had you on them. So now Bill's thinking RFM actually hasn't been on the emails. So that kind of comes up. Bill says, I thought you were on them. Okay, so I know this is going to be a kerfuffle. So here's me again. This is email number 31 from me, Maven. And I kind of take on a lot of the blame for myself because, again, part of it is just kind of in a joking manner. And again, I understand that it's possible that I'm incorrect here and maybe I missed out on some emails or maybe some other things have happened that I'm not aware. So I try to kind of get ahead of it. I know Michelle and company are going to see it. I hope that, they won't before RFM fixes things, but I know it's probably really unlikely. So I send this email 9:35 p.m. to everyone. I say, hello everyone, Bill, RFM, and I are regrouping as I feel concerned that we're not on the same page in terms of desired outcomes or in our understanding of yours. Once Bill and RFM whip me into shape and get me up to speed with them and we all understand each other, then we'll focus on making sure we all understand the same things from what you are saying. Thank you for your patience. I'm so sorry to be gumming things up, but I really want to make sure I'm understanding things and I have grave concern that I haven't and that I may have been misleading to you inadvertently. In Michelle's response, I find it really fascinating that what she references, especially this last line, that I worry that I may have been misleading you inadvertently. Again, at this point, I'm pretty sure, all of us think that we have the correct understanding of what's going on. So I do think I'm correct, but like the others, I understand that I can be wrong. So I do preemptively take some blame on in this email, just in case. But again, like in the response, okay, so I sent this video, a half-hour long video, right? Half an hour long. And again, I explain why we want to have a conversation beforehand. And so that is what I'm referring to when I'm saying maybe I misled you about why we want to have this discovery process. Maybe that's what I got wrong. And maybe Bill and RFM would love to just go ahead and do the live show. I don't know. There's lots of ways I could be wrong. But the one thing from that half-hour long video where I address so many different things, all right. The one thing that Michelle picks out from that she feels this line is referring to, that I may have been misleading to you inadvertently, is wanting an honest dialogue. And I guess at this point I shouldn't be surprised, but I absolutely can still be disappointed. And I am. That out of this entire video that Michelle watched of me, trying to explain our side, just trying to set some things straight, again, in a verbal dialogue form rather than these damned emails. The one thing she takes from it that she thinks this is an admission to lying about is the desire for this conversation to happen. And I just think that's sad. Let's keep going. These are more texts where, Bill is expressing that he thought RFM was in the emails, which he was. This explains part of this. No one needs to feel bad when they do the best they can with the info they have. I hear you. I didn't know your podcast had anything to do with this specific point. I thought you were just sharing the comments that you had gotten, which is true. That was what the episode was about. Bill says, I never sensed handling the day differently than I did. It never occurred to me that the email was stuff affecting what you were doing, you as an RFM. I had just assumed you would see emails later in the day and would respond if you wanted. So if I messed that up, I am sorry. We're all willing to work together here and admit wrong, even preemptively when we are not wrong about something, as Bill just did here. He wasn't wrong about RFM being in on the emails. So RFM responds, it's just a funny coming together of the circumstances. And then RFM says, I posted an announcement on my Facebook page to explain. And then I love you guys. Thanks for joining me for part 1. If you want to continue the journey, my descent into madness as we go down this rabbit hole, then click on the link below for part 2 and the resolution.